Okay, well, we'll go ahead and call tonight's meeting to order. As we always do, if you would stand, please, available, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Okay, thank you. Before we call the roll call, in the past, for quite a while, at least since I've been mayor, and even the mayor before me, has had a moment of silence with all the things that's going on in the world. And it dawned on me after discussion with an individual that focusing on just on Ukraine with the problems that's obviously occurring over there is something that obviously we all need to be concerned about, and we hate to see that occurring. But then in the light of the mass shootings that we've seen in New York and in California and Chicago, Illinois, and even locally of having a teen that was killed in Olathe by 6 other teens, I think there's a lot of discontent, hatred, and just bigotry and going on in the world, and so rather than just reflect on Ukraine this evening, I'd just like to take a moment of silence just to think about all the things that might be going on in the world locally and also around the world, and what we as individuals can do just to promote happiness and kindness and not hate. So if you'd join me for just a moment of silence. Okay, thank you for enduring with me. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll, please?
Mayor Pape.
Here.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Here.
Councilmember Hands.
Here.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Here.
Councilmember Leahy.
Here.
Councilmember Neal.
Here.
Councilmember Ryder.
Here.
Councilmember Silvers.
Here.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Here.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll start next with our public items, and members of the public are encouraged to use this time to make comments about matters that do not appear on the agenda. Comments about items on the regular agenda will be taken up on each item as it is considered. Please note that you have 5 minutes to make comments, and we will let you know when your time is up. I did have a sign-up sheet, but no one is on it. But I see somebody raising their hand, and please come forward. Yeah, straight. Yeah, and please give your name and an address for the record, Ms. Hupp.
Nancy Hupp, 13700 West 90th Place in Lenexa. I honestly can't remember when I last updated you all on what's happening with the Community Center Foundation, but I thought I would come tonight and just tell you about some of the good things happening. First of all, if you remember, several hundreds of dollars were donated in honor of Mayor Sislem's retirement, and he did give us the approval to use that money to purchase more flags. So that funding, along with the funds from our treasury, we were able to purchase 77 new flags. Not 78, but 77 new flags, because they have gone up in price. No surprise there. So we purchased new flags, then we put together a group of volunteers to put those 77 new flags on the flag poles. And I did thank all of those volunteers. And Mayor Pape was one of them. We can always count on Mayor Pape. They're building up a sweat with us and getting dirty, but getting the job done. So I wanted to tell you, and I hope you've all read, that we are deep into planning our 2022 flag display this year. And that's being led by your former council partner, Scott Diebold. The decision was made, and it was a tough decision, but we cannot do a concert this year because earlier in the year, as we were starting to plan, it was still such an unknown situation with COVID and securing a band, but we will have a full flag display. And along with that, I want to let you know that our flags are now flying down at the World War II Museum and Memorial, along with the traveling Vietnam Wall. I'm sorry, World War I, my error, World War I. And it is a beautiful display down there, so I hope you'll get a chance to go down and see the flags. And I thank Councilmember Yadrich for being my messenger with getting them some replacement equipment. So that's all I have. Any questions for me as related to flags? Thank you very much for your time and your service.
Thank you, Ms. Hub. As for those of you that may not know, she served the city in numerous capacities as council and as our council president for a number of years. And even though she has moved out of our city, she still stays heavily involved, and we appreciate all you do. Okay, is there anyone else out there in the public that would like to come forward and have something to say before we close out the public meeting or public items? I see no one rushing forward, so we will close out the public item section of that, and we will open up a public hearing. Looks like Director Dyer is going to lead us off in that. Try to open that public hearing up. Do I have to do that? Is that
Okay, Mayor, council members, Brian Dyer, Community Development Director. This evening, after my presentation, you will have a public hearing on regards to the City of Merriam's Community Development Block Grant application to Johnson County, or CDBG. Every year, for the past many years, the city has made an application to the county for CDBG funds. And what we've used them for primarily is to do our streetlight program. We're getting very close to being to the end of that program, getting all that done. So this is a pretty neat thing to finally start seeing it wrap up. So what the request is going to be to the county is for $600,000 for the removal of 9 Cobra head overhead streetlights, and then to install 18 City of Merriam standard LED streetlights. I got some pictures here in just a second, but just to let everybody know, those streetlights, I think we're all familiar with them, are much more aesthetically pleasing. They sit much lower to the ground, provide much better lighting for the neighbors, encourages neighbors to get out and walk, also provides a higher level of security, obviously better visibility throughout the area. So a little bit about CDBG. Up on the screen, I have the income limits. A couple things to note: that we still do not have the 2020 census data for income, so everything we're still using for CDBG is based upon 2010 block groups. But up there on is the guideline. So to be eligible to apply for CDBG, a block group needs to be at 50% or below the area low income standards as set by HUD. So on the screen is the standards that we'll be using for this year, just a little bit as a reference. So for a family of 4 in Johnson County, a family of 4 with an income of $43,300 at or below would be considered low income. Now, the next exhibit is the map of the City of Merriam. This is the block groups that are eligible. Everything that is colored in, those are eligible block groups. And the important thing to note is down there in kind of small letters, but every year HUD issues an exemption for affluent counties, and Johnson County is one of the affluent counties in the United States. So they lower the standards for being eligible to participate in the CDBG program from 50% down to 43.46%. So as you can see, that's how Merriam is able to get those block groups to be considered eligible for the CDBG program. You also see in there highlighted are the 2 areas in which we propose to apply to the county for CDBG funds for streetlights. A little bit closer look, and while this is pretty busy, it really gives a good example of how fantastic a job Merriam Public Works Department has done in getting decorative streetlights in. All the purple dots are decorative streetlights. As you can tell, that's a lot of purple dots. And then the blue dots are the proposed streetlights that we're applying to the county for installation of. The first kind of area up here is West 64th Street. This is the vacant Kmart property, so we'll be going around West 64th Street. And then the other area is EB Avenue, 68th Street, and Slater. This is the old Lee Jeans building. Really, these streetlights are a great benefit to a couple of our significant apartment complexes. Peppertree and Pine Gate provide great access and great connectivity to provide a lighted path for folks to get to Antioch Park and then the other shopping areas, and also to get them over to the rec center. So again, the request that we'll be requesting $60,000 from CDBG. It's a $110,000 total project cost, so the remaining $50,000 will be from CIP as well as City of Merriam labor. Again, this is a 2023 program. We always apply a year in advance, so that, before you open up your public hearing, I'd be happy to answer. Oh, let me just real quick, sorry. For folks who haven't seen them before, here are the existing overhead streetlights, and these are a typical Merriam residential decorative streetlight to replace them. Again, much lower to the ground, LED, so energy efficient and much more aesthetically pleasing. So again, with that, be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Director Dyer concerning this program? All right. I see no questions. I guess we're open up the public meeting at this time. Is there anyone in the public currently that would like to speak about our application for these grants or have other ideas? I see no one rushing forward, so, okay. Well, with that, I guess I can close the public hearing before we vote. That's correct, yeah? Close the public hearing. And at this point, I would entertain a motion for that. What we're missing. Okay, yeah, Ms. Godrich, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, do we want to wait for
Well,
Christine?
I'm not sure how long she's going to be. Let's go ahead and proceed.
Okay. All right. Mr. Mayor, I move the council authorize the mayor to sign the city's 2023 CDBG application.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I hear a second? Okay, yeah, Mr. Neal, go ahead.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands. Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodridge.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And considering that we have only one item listed currently, does anyone have any questions about that before we entertain a motion? I see no questions concerning the agenda. I'll entertain a motion. Ms. Yodridge.
Mr. Mayor, I move the council approve consent agenda item number 1.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second.
Mr. Neal, seconds. Okay. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodridge.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Voting on CDBG, right?
This is actually the consent agenda.
Oh, the consent agenda, aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, well, moving on, it looks like the next section of our meeting this evening is the mayor's report, and I am fortunate to get to read a couple proclamations, one of my favorite things. Okay, well, the first proclamation is about monarch butterfly restoration. For those of you that don't know, there's a huge butterfly down on Merriam Drive sitting on this big rock, so please go down and see that. But other than that, let me read the proclamation. Okay, whereas the monarch butterfly is an iconic North American species whose multi-generational migration and metamorphosis from caterpillar to butterfly has captured the imagination of millions of Americans, and whereas we, the undersigned mayors and heads of the local or tribal government, are deeply concerned about the decline of the monarch butterfly population, both the western and eastern monarch populations have experienced significant declines. Less than 1% of the western monarch population remains, while the eastern population has fallen by as much as 90%. Monarch scientists attribute the population decline to degradation and loss of summer breeding habitat in the U.S. and loss of winter habitat in south central Mexico and coastal California. And whereas cities, towns, and counties and communities have a critical role to play to help save the monarch butterfly, municipalities can provide habitat at public parks, median strips, community gardens, schools, and municipal buildings like recreation centers and libraries. Events such as community workshops, native plant giveaways, and monarch festivals can educate residents about cultural significance of monarchs and how to create habitat. Simple changes in landscaping ordinances or other policies can make a big difference for the monarch, too. And whereas we recognize the importance of creating monarch and pollinator habitat at parks, gardens, and other green spaces that every member of our community can equally enjoy. Our work to help save the monarch butterfly intentionally engages all parts of our communities, ensuring that historically marginalized communities are not left out of the work or that the many benefits this work will create. And whereas when mayors speak up and take a stand, our communities notice. Now therefore I, Bob Pape, by the virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of Merriam, Kansas, do hereby commit to help restore habitat for the monarch and encourage our residents to do the same, so that these magnificent butterflies will once again flourish across the continent. Proclaimed this 23rd day of May, 2022. Bob Pape, Mayor. Okay. Well, let's hope that, and we do have our own garden too, by the way, down on the Streamway Trail, so feel free to go by then and see that as well. And I get a second proclamation, okay, and this one is the Mark 50 Ford Day, which Mark is Mid-America Regional Council. Okay, whereas for half a century, local governments in the Kansas City region have come together through the Mid-America Regional Council, MARC, to partner on regional initiatives and develop innovative solutions, and whereas the region consists of 9 counties and 119 cities, which benefit from working across boundaries on a wide variety of issues and coordinating with diverse disciplines and sectors, including cities, counties, nonprofit organizations, social services, educational systems, and special districts. And whereas the region's leaders engage in informed decision-making through insightful data analysis and participate in a problem-solving forum to positively impact progress, and whereas each jurisdiction and individual has a role in creating a strong regional community and enabling everyone to come together to achieve positive change for the next 50 years. And whereas MARC is an organization that promotes regional cooperation through leadership, planning, and action, and is guided by the core values of integrity, innovation, collaboration, diversity, and inclusion, excellence in performance, and service leadership. And whereas the City of Merriam has participated or benefit from working across boundaries, allowing us to better serve residents because of our regional work regarding public safety, transportation, environment, early learning, aging, and shared local government services. And whereas members of the Merriam governing body celebrate the collaborative work that's been accomplished over the past 50 years and dedicate June 10th, 2022, the day of MARC's annual regional assembly, as Mark 50 Ford Day, in recognition of the enormous progress the region will continue to make over the next 5 decades. Therefore, I, Bob Pape, Mayor, do hereby proclaim June 10th, 2022 as Mark 50 Ford Day in the City of Merriam, and urge local leaders and community members to reflect on the great progress made in the past 50 years and join us in welcoming a future built upon strong regional collaboration, connections, relationships, and accomplishments. By Bob Pape, the Mayor. Yeah, those are, yeah, I wish I could take credit for that, but somebody else writes those, and they do an excellent job. So, okay, and it appears the next thing we have coming up is our Visitors Bureau Annual Report, and we have Director Crane with us tonight to give that report.
Fancy. Thank you. Thank you, Council, for having me here this evening to present our 2021 annual report. Before I get started, I would like you to know that we also have a pollinator garden over at Merriam Historic Plaza, and we have seen the monarchs from time to time. So also, Lauren and I planted that ourselves, so we hope that you will get by sometime to see it. Okay, so in your packets, I'll just start with the director's message for 2021. You know, obviously still a very challenging year, but better than the year before. The experts with Smith Travel Research are predicting full industry recovery to RevPAR, which is revenue per available room, from the pandemic by 2024. However, Merriam is faring quite well already, as we are trending closer to pre-pandemic levels right now. In fact, during a meeting with hotels last week, everyone in attendance spoke about higher occupancy and daily rates happening right now, already going into the second quarter, with summer bookings increasing daily. One of our markets, which are group bus tours, was slower to return because the demographic is typically more senior in nature, and they had to be very mindful of traveling together in such close-knit quarters on a bus. But they are pent up and ready to travel again, and we are getting some recaptured bookings from that market right now. One of the biggest challenges right now we're facing, I think in every industry, but specifically the hotel and lodging tourism industry, is staffing shortages, supply chain issues, and inflation. Every hotel in Merriam has expressed their concern over trying to find employees, which is a sentiment I think that is shared with most of our businesses. To the next page, we'll just talk a second about data. As many of you know, and some are new, so I'll just let you know that we are funded by a portion of the transient guest tax, which is paid by visitors who are sleeping in our overnight rooms at our 4 Merriam lodging properties. In 2021, those guest tax collections totaled just over $406,000, which was a 42% increase over the year before, which is no surprise given the travel bans put in place during the pandemic. Those dollars of transient guest tax help to fund the Visitors Bureau, special events in Merriam, including Turkey Creek Festival, the car show, Merriam Marketplace operations, and some economic development activities. Occupancy trends for the year in 2021 were nearly 25% higher than in 2020 and on par for 2019 levels pre-pandemic. Our average daily rate in 2021 climbed as well, but we're not quite back to those pre-pandemic levels of rates just yet. As you may have noticed, one of our hotel brands changed hands in December of 2021 after the Drury Inn & Suites sold to Hotel Lotus after nearly 40 years of greeting visitors and doing business in Merriam. They opened in September of 1982 here in Merriam. Moving onward to the visitation numbers at the bottom of the page. Unfortunately, because of pandemic, research was held off from both the state and Visit KC, which is where we source our data. So these numbers are very similar to what you may have seen last year. It has been our understanding that both entities will be conducting research this year or next. But I think it's important to note that it does argue the importance of what visitors do in our communities, their collective spending power, and the job creation and taxes they save in our community. Going on to the next page, we'll just talk a little bit about our highlights for the year. It's really fun to celebrate our wins and achievements in the industry, and last year we were thrilled to actually celebrate a little bit. So a few of our most memorable moments include once again winning the Travel Industry Association of Kansas First Place Award for Best In-House Visitors Guide. This is an honor we've enjoyed for the past 4 years, and we're hoping to continue moving forward as we've had some really positive comments on our current issue. We also won at the same conference Best Online Media Award for our new website redesign at exploremerriam.com, and we also received a Gold Prism Award from the PRSA Greater KC chapter for our Visitors Guide. We did host our first ever Tourism Gives Back volunteer service campaign with KC Destinations, which is a collaborative unit of CVBs across the metro. 5 communities across the entire KC metro came to Merriam to help us clean up Turkey Creek Streamway Trail one day in May. We also redesigned our leisure and group tour e-newsletters, which are sent to nearly 1,000 people with an average open rate of 26%. We still managed to host in a pandemic 2 travel writers throughout the year. And from one of those visits, 2 Merriam businesses, Strawberry Hill Povatitsa and KC Strings, were then featured in the book 100 Things to Do in Kansas Before You Die by Roxy Yonke, who is a travel writer and author. It's a strange name for a publication, but apparently a very popular one. And last but not least, we did welcome Tia the cat, our first feline visitor to Merriam Historic Plaza. Tia was leashed and with impeccable manners, and according to her owner, Tia accompanies him on all of her domestic travels. So that was a first for us after many years of operation and serving visitors. On our last page this evening, we are definitely encouraged by the signs of recovery in our industry. We know there are still challenges that lie ahead with staffing shortages. People are traveling, groups are moving about, and sports teams are really booking. If you've driven past the hotels the past couple of weekends, you've seen softball buses. I've got baseball teams in town this week. NASCAR was here a couple weekends ago. That kind of travel is returning now. Looking ahead, our community and visitor guide will be released a bit earlier now in the year, and it will land in mailboxes of Merriam residents each year now. Merriam Historic Plaza will get a few facility upgrades after 15 years in operation. If you've been lately, we've painted the basins on the fountains, and we've replaced the trekking over the water feature. Hoping to do new historic signs as they are really fading and breaking down now. We've had to replace a few fountain parts, and kudos to Caleb for figuring out what the clunking noise was. But that fountain is quieter than it's ever been, and Lauren and I really appreciate that from a sound standpoint inside the office. And then we are hoping to possibly look at some conference room flooring replacement in the coming year. Another thing you probably are aware of is we will be adding some economic development and business retention mix of services along with tourism. So hopefully maybe next year I'll have a little bit of a diversified report for you in that manner. We just met recently with hotel partners to discuss a new grant program to talk about hotel upgrades and facility improvements. As you know, that stock is aging, and we're hoping to get them on board with some improvements, and they were all very excited in attendance. We are meeting in August with about 20 media writers from across the United States, an event that's been canceled 2 years in a row. And so we're hoping to get in front of those folks to talk about Merriam and all the wonderful things that they can write about in the future. And then to close out our report, we're always in search of people who are ambassadors for our community. I like to say that before someone becomes a resident or a business owner, they are first a visitor to our town. And so anything that you can do, sharing a visitor's guide or giving a 5-star review on Google or TripAdvisor, every little bit helps to help people choose Merriam as their destination of choice. I think that's all I have for you tonight. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Director Crane? Well, I guess there are no questions.
You're a tough crowd.
You're doing a good job, and keep up the good work.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, looks like our next item is acknowledgement of receipt of the 2021 Independent Auditors Report. Director Don is going to
Good
come to us.
evening. Tara Laughlin with Allen Gibbs and Hulick is here to come up and talk to you about the results of the audit. And then after she speaks, I thought I would give you a few further thoughts on the item that was in the administrative report last week as far as investment earnings goes. So I'll let her come up and speak first.
Good evening. For those of you that are new to the council, it's been a couple years since I've been able to present live, so it's nice to be back and in person. I'm Tara Laughlin. I'm with Allen Gibbs and Hulick, a vice president in our government assurance practice. And annually, we always present the results of the financial statement audit during a council meeting. And tonight is that night. So I'm going to be going over, you should have a letter in your packet. I'm going to be highlighting the items in this letter that's specific to the fiscal year 21 audit. First off, just the scope of services that we provide to the city. We do perform, of course, the audit of the financial statements, which is we issue an opinion stating that those financial statements are materially accurate and reflect the books and records of the city. And happy to say that we did issue an unmodified or clean opinion on those financial statements. For those of you who have looked at prior year's financial statements, you're going to notice our opinion is a little bit longer this year. That's not because anything was different with the city, but auditing standards changed and it just increased the language of the opinion. So when you're looking at it from last year to this year, it's just increased in length because of our standards changed, but it's still the same clean, unmodified opinion. So I wanted to point that out. Before I get to the results, I do just want to thank Donna, Trish, Sherry, all the staff that we work with during the audit process. They're all very responsive to our questions, inquiries, providing us support. It was nice to be on site a little bit more this year during the audit, but I just want to thank them for all their help throughout that process. Looking at the letter, kind of starting towards the bottom of page 1, we talk about if there's any new accounting standards that the city had to implement this year, and there were none. I always like to point that out, so that means if you're looking at last year's results to this year's results, the changes in those is due to changes in operations, not because something changed in how it had to be reported for accounting standards go. So no significant changes this year to those practices. Towards the top of the second page, we are required to discuss any significant estimates that are within the financial statements, as not all numbers can be hard, fast known numbers. There is some estimation processes involved. There's no new estimates from prior years, and how those estimates were determined is very much similar to how they were last year. Those estimates involved recording liabilities for compensated absences, other employee liabilities like other post-employment benefits. The largest estimate is recording the city's share of CAPER's pension liability. So again, all those just kind of relate to employee benefits that are owed at year end, and those are done through estimation processes. Two of those, the OPEB and the pension liability, are done through actuary reports. So our responsibility with those as auditors is to understand how management determines those estimates, review kind of the inputs, the outputs, and make sure it's being done reasonably. And in all cases, we did find that those were being done reasonably. Next item in the letter is audit adjustments. We only had one audit adjustment, so overall very clean audit this year. And this audit adjustment only impacts the full accrual statements, which are the first two statements you see. So it wasn't an issue with day-to-day recording. It was just to true up the recording of the other post-employment benefit liability at year end. So overall, very clean audit. See, the audit adjustment was only $76,000. So overall, very good job by your finance team. We had no uncorrected misstatements. I always like to describe what that is. It sounds worse than it is, but sometimes during an audit, items come up towards the end that aren't too significant or would impact users of the financial statements, and their timing issues like year-end accruals. They can self-fix next year, and so in some cases, it's determined not to record those and reflect them in the current financials, push it to next year. But in this case, we had none this year. So again, one audit adjustment, that's it. Very, very clean audit. On page 3, towards the top, under observations of the audit process, I like to highlight this paragraph. There's a lot of information there, but generally it says we did not have any disagreements with management. They were responsive to our questions. Support was provided for items that we needed. So I always like to just point that out because it is a lot of work on top of normal jobs to have us come in and ask questions while they're trying to get their day-to-day job done. So again, just a shout out to the staff. The rest of the letter is just some other information we provide to all of our clients, whether they're in a government, not-for-profit, corporate setting, just some general risks that are out there that we like council members to be aware of and kind of have at the top of your mind as you work throughout the year. The biggest one of those that you'll see in there is just cybersecurity. I think everybody knows that world is just kind of scary right now with everything that's going on. So just some information there for you to have and to think about as you go throughout the year of just those general risks that are in the environment. So all in all, that is the results of the audit. Again, very clean audit. And before I turn it back over to Donna, I'll see if anybody has any questions specific to the audit results.
Does anyone on the council have questions? Derek? No? Well, it looks like you've done a good job of explaining as well, so
Well,
thank you for what you've done. Director Oliver.
Okay, the item that I wanted to explain a little further, there was a memo in there from Columbia Capital that stated last year we collected around $257,000 in interest earnings on our investments. So we were actually paid that. However, if you look in the audit report, it says that we had negative earnings. And so how could that happen? That's very counterintuitive. The way, we primarily invest in U.S. Treasuries and U.S. agency notes. And the way those work are the U.S. Treasury decides, okay, on January 5th, we're going to issue this much in debt. So let's say they issued $100,000 in debt. It's usually, it would be much bigger numbers, but let's say $100,000. And they look out there and they say, oh, okay, the interest rates for this length of maturity is running about 2%. So we're going to sell this $100,000. You give us $100,000, we'll pay you 2% every year for, say, the next 10 years. Okay, so I go out, I write my check for $100,000, and I get that investment. And say 2 years into that 10 years, I decide, you know what, I want to go build a community center. I need that money now. I don't need it 10 years from now. So I want to sell it. There is a very, very robust secondary market for these types of instruments, and most of what we buy is from the secondary market. But let's say instead of a 1% interest rate being good, which is what we've been getting, now the interest rate environment has shifted and everybody can get 2% on that type of investment. So why would an investor go and buy this from me knowing they were only going to get 1% in interest? That would make no sense at all. So in order to be able to sell it, I'm going to have to sell it at a discount. I'm going to have to sell it for less than $100,000. So let's say instead I sell it to them for $98,000. So I take a little bit of a hit on the principal. I don't get as much principal as I paid. At the end of the investment, whoever holds it, they're going to get their $400,000 because Treasury has said, I'm paying 1% interest every year and I'll give you $100,000. But all these intermediate sales, sometimes if interest rates have gone down, they'll sell for $102,000 instead of $100,000. But it's just to get that interest rate that they're going to get from the U.S. Treasury to match what the current interest rate is today. When interest rates rise, then the principal value of your investment goes down. These auditors, they're like real persnickety about fair market value. They want to know if you sold every investment in your portfolio on December 31st, how much money would you get? Because interest rates were already up to about 1.5% at December 31st, and most of our investments, we had been getting like 0.1% or 0.25%. Their fair market value was significantly less than what we paid for them. Does that mean we're going to lose our shirts on this? No, because the city always holds to maturity. So we're going to get our money back whenever it matures. We would only lose that money if we sold it before maturity. I know since I've been here that we've never sold an investment prior to maturity. And my best guess would be that's probably never happened in Merriam's history. Governments are very good at we match our cash flow, we know when we need our money. So we have that risk, but it's slight. But that's what happened. Even though we collected that $260, whenever we moved that to the right fair market value, it made it look like we lost money. And I know in visiting with Tara about that, that's a phenomena that they've seen with a healthy, yeah, I mean, that just happens. And so I hope that explains that. And if there are any other questions, I would be happy to answer those questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Oliver?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm not even sure what I would ask. Okay, moving on, I think our next item up is the Planning Commissions. Concerning the Planning Commission, and Director Dyer is going to talk to us a little bit about House of Hope, I believe.
Good evening again, Mayor, council members, Brian Dyer, Community Development Director. You have two planning commission items on your agenda this evening. The first one is a request from the House of Hope to modify their existing special use permit. The modification request is to allow them to serve both boys and girls. Just a little bit of history about it real quick. House of Hope, first approval for the city, from the city of Merriam was back in 2006. With that approval, there was a number of conditions and stipulations on there. One of them was that the facility be limited to 24 girls between the ages of 12 and 17, and outpatient counseling sessions be limited to 15 sessions a week. That condition, along with a number of those, have carried forward with all their renewals over the subsequent years, even the renewal that would just occurred back in the first of this year on January. So after that renewal in January occurred, House of Hope staff contacted City of Merriam staff and talked a little bit about their desire to serve, be able to serve all children, not just girls. And staff instructed them, directed them to make an application to have their special use permit modified to remove or revise that condition stipulation. In conversations with House of Hope, they've indicated, as I think you may be aware, they have two facilities, or two buildings, I should say. Their existing one that's been there for a number of years, and then they just recently built another building to the north of that building. So they have facilities to separate both the boys and the girl population, and that's what their intent to do if they decide to serve boys. So again, staff instructed them to hold a neighborhood meeting. They held a neighborhood meeting in regards to this. They had two attendees to that. They had a positive response in regards to their desire to modify their special use permit. They went through the special use, they are going through the typical special use process. So the first step was go to the Planning Commission, who held a public hearing on this request. There was no public comment regarding this request. And just to make sure, I'll read you what the request is, or what the change would be, the condition will now read, the facility be limited to 24 children between the ages of 12 and 17. So it gets rid of the stipulation to just be girls. Again, we've had no public comment in regards to this. The applicant is present as well to answer any questions, and staff will be happy to answer any questions of the council in regards to this.
Before we call for questions, I would just like to acknowledge that I did attend the public meeting that House of Hope did have. There was one other individual that was there. Nothing that I learned at that evening is any different than what's already been said by Director Dyer, and so I have nothing. I learned nothing new that wasn't already told in all the documents that we currently have. So, okay, go ahead, Ms. Yodrich.
I have a question, and this might be better for the House of Hope representative to answer. But we're going to separate boys and girls at the two facilities. Is there a likelihood that someone might get turned away for residents, like inpatient, because we are keeping them separate? Or, will there be capacity issues? I guess.
I'll let the representative.
That's what I figured, yeah.
Yeah. There's
I just want to be sure. So this resets their 5-year special use permit, right?
It does.
Okay.
It does.
So June 1st of '22, right?
Correct. And we just did that simply to keep things
Yeah.
as straightforward
I
as
agree.
possible.
I agree. Thank you.
If there are any other questions, I'll let the representative.
Okay, are there any other questions before we call up the representative from House of Hope? Okay, thank you, Director Dyer. Please come forward, sir, and give your name and your address and your title, maybe.
Tim Overby, Executive Director, 7040 Antioch Road. And your question was, would there be capacity limitations for the girls because of opening the boys?
Yeah, or
Is
the
that-
boys, or, how is that going to work now that you're trying to balance the two?
So when the second facility was built back in 2013, the idea, and it was built to code by for the state of Kansas to house additional girls in our residential program. That never really happened for a variety of reasons, but mostly I think what we figured out is that given that particular space and some of the common spaces, and even given our own therapeutic philosophy, that keeping the group smaller actually was more effective. And so we really sort of capped ourselves a little bit at 12 to 14 girls. When we began thinking through and discussing as a board opening up a boys program, we realized that part of what we have is this amazing facility that we've at this point been using for office staff, a family counseling center, family outpatient counseling center, and our school, which we would continue to use for the school, some for our staffing offices. But we had this facility that we could actually serve boys in the same way we've been serving girls for 17 years, keeping the group smaller in group therapy, individual sessions, and we just realized that that would better utilize all of our resources, but we also feel like we would be able to serve another part of the population. So we referenced a national directory that refers parents to residential facilities like ours, and we asked them, hey, is there anything around this particular area? And they said, no, actually, there are more boys programs in the country than there are girls, but not the way that you guys do that in terms of your clinical approach. And so we felt like that the opportunity was there, and we would not actually hurt the girls program. By having the two facilities, if our number of boys increase, we would flip them to the larger house. If the number of girls stayed higher, we would keep them in the larger house.
That answered my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I see no other questions. Thank you for elaborating on that. At this point, I would entertain a motion. Okay, Ms. Hands, go ahead.
I move that the council concur with the recommendation of the Planning Commission and approve with conditions the modification to House of Hope's existing special use permit and authorize the mayor to sign the effectuating ordinance.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Ms. Shadrich.
Mayor, I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we go into the next item, I apologize, I must go back, but we did not acknowledge the receipt of the finance or the audit report, and I would entertain a motion for that. I think our questions were answered, but I did not get that voted on. So, yes, Ms. Shadrich.
Mr. Mayor, I move the council acknowledge the receipt of the city's 2021 financial audit report.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Hands.
Mr. Mayor, I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Looks like back on correct schedule, and we'll have Director Dyer speak to us about Advent Health Cancer Center.
I need visual aids for this one, so just a sec here. This next item from your Planning Commission is a preliminary development plan approval request for Advent Health to add an additional medical office building on their campus. It'll be a facility that will house their cancer center. It's a three-story building, and it'll be approximately 71,000 square feet, and it'll replace. It'll be located where their existing parking garage is, on the west side of their the campus. So real briefly, I'll walk you through the campus area. Again, just let me back up a little bit, just a little bit of history on it. The medical center back in 2003 had a rezoning request that was preliminary to planning and development general. At that time, they had a preliminary development plan that was also approved that covered the campus wide. They've had a number of different improvements that have occurred over time that fit within that preliminary development plan. However, this is a facility that was not shown on that preliminary development plan, so instead of going directly to a final development plan, that's why we are doing a preliminary development plan for that facility this evening. So with that, and I know this is probably difficult to see, but this is the Advent Health Care facility campus. As we all know, it's quite large. What we're looking at here on the west side, this is the parking garage that sits on the west side. This is the garage that they're proposing to tear down and then build a new medical office building. Again, this is in your packet. I know it's really busy. However, I think it does an excellent job in demonstrating as to what the proposal is. I want to point out, first of all, to the north here, this is a parking garage that's been recently constructed there. If anybody's been up there by the facility, I'm sure you'll notice it. I just want to point this out because obviously parking is a big a big point of discussion that always happens at the hospital. So a little bit further to the north is Georgetown Apartments. So here to the west, this is East Frontage Road. This is one of the entry points into the campus. This is West 74th Street. Across the way, let me move this thing. Across the way is the current cancer facility. Medical office building is one of the newer buildings that was constructed on campus. So as we look over here on the east side, this is the existing facility, and this is the parking garage right here, two-story. Really, I believe it's more of a parking structure, so two-story parking structure, and this is what they're proposing to tear down and construct a new medical office building. Speaking of parking, we did do a parking analysis on this project. Once this is done and completed, there will be about 4,152 spaces on the campus. That is more than what's required per city code. There is a net decrease, about 300 spaces because of this. But again, they meet city code in regards to parking. So, go to the next. So a little bit more description of it. So this is the footprint for the new building, and this will be the parking field. So this is at level, at grade parking. So previously this had been the two-story parking garage, so this is now at grade parking. Again, the structured parking is large parking garages here to the north. As you can see here, they've really done a lot to try to improve the walkability, try to improve the pedestrian feel for this. I don't know if anybody's been down that area. It is a little austere, I would say, again, because it is one large parking garage. So it's definitely making an improvement to the campus look and the campus feel. Here's a much better rendering of showing all the landscaping that's going to be occur here. Here you'll see the outline of the new building. That's right here. This is the existing facility. Again, quite a bit of green space. Again, you can see winding paths. Up here, there is some interesting art features and gathering space that will be occurring there. Here's the architecture of the facility. Extensive amount of glazing, using stone veneer as well as wood veneer on it. Again, extensive amount of glazing. Showing the proposed signage for the project. And then probably the best pictures that we have here for the project is these. This is a rendering, so you're looking from the north west to the south and east. So you can see the existing medical office building has a cancer center. Here's where you'll see the beginning of the new facility. Back here is the, I believe the original towers are located back here. So you can see, again, gathering space, greeting space, art space in front, quite a bit of green space. This is, the facility as you come in off of 74th Street, much better entryway feature, a significant improvement to how the facility will look as you come into the facility. And then this is, again, more of a ground level view, again, looking from the northwest looking to the southeast. As you can see the main entryway point into the facility. And then, yeah, I did want to point this out. The rendering's a little bit hard to see, but this is a really cool feature, at least from staff's perspective, is an open area up here for that's going to have some green space on, I won't want to say on rooftop green space, but it'll have a level of green space that's going to be open to the sky and be available. I believe they may be having maybe staff as well as some meeting space in there and things like that. So again, just wanted to point that out. That's not something that shows up very well on the architectural renderings. It took staff a little while to get that all figured out, but this rendering really does a great job in showing that. So applicant is here. To answer any questions, we'll say the Planning Commission had a public hearing on this item. There were no public comments on it, and the Planning Commission gave a unanimous recommendation for approval of the preliminary development plan. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Okay, Mr. Silvers, go ahead.
Mr. Dyer, has Advent Health shared with you predicted numbers of increased traffic to the campus after this facility opens, and is a traffic study going to be done?
They did do a traffic analysis on it, and the indications were, and we also met with KDOT on this as well, and the traffic analysis essentially pointed out that the existing infrastructure will be able to handle the any kind of increased traffic. Whoops.
Thank you.
Were there any other questions? Yes, Mr. Hill?
I was going to ask a similar question, but I kind of slightly, I'll add a flavor to it. Obviously, the cost of services the city provides to this campus, I don't know what that is, but I assume there is some number related to the number of patients served, the traffic, the variety of issues. This expansion, what does Advent Health expect to see in sort of an increase in some of those measures? Have we looked at that, or do we know anything about that?
No, this is required, staff analyzed this based upon the preliminary development plan standards that are contained within the code, and there's no type of code requirements for analysis of that.
Okay. Ms. Aldrich, go ahead.
Do you know if they're working toward any LEED certification for the new building?
Do not know. That'd be a question to ask the applicant.
And I have a second question, if anybody else.
Sure, go ahead.
Maybe a third. So what would happen with the existing space? Does the surgery center take over that entire building? Does it become, so I'm pretty sure the cancer center and the surgery center split, do they?
That'd be a question to
They're
ask-
two different buildings? The surgery center splits with somebody, I thought.
That would be a question to ask the applicant.
Yeah, okay. And I will have another question for the applicant then.
I have one for Brian.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Mahay.
On the plans, there's marked some future expansion locations. I would assume if they do fill in either of those spots, we would have to reevaluate the parking study.
Correct. And that's an excellent question. A couple of things on that. You are correct. If they were to wish to fill in that, they would have to do another parking analysis. That is absolutely correct. And I also want to point out that, and the applicant is aware of this as one of the conditions of approval, that expansion crosses a lot line. And we have put them on notice that if they want to do that expansion, they will have to replat to move that lot line.
Ms. Hans, go ahead.
I attempted to look at the map and then actually look at the buildings. Not always my forte. It looks to me like what is being, the parking facility that is being replaced is the one that we used to go into outpatient.
I believe that's correct, yes.
Holy moly, what is going to happen to us when we want to go, we and all of our constituents want to go up there during all of this?
I'll let the applicant answer that, but I believe they're trying to push folks to go in the main entranceway point now. So I will let the applicant have that discussion.
thank
Let
you.
him answer that question for you.
Any other questions for Director Dyer before we ask the applicant to come forward? Okay, I see no other questions. Could we have, what is our applicant?
They're back there drawing straws.
Drawing straws, okay. As you come forward, sort of give your name and also obviously, I guess, who are you with?
My name is Brian Falk. I'm with Hafer Welker, the architect for the project. We are located at 11460 Tomahawk Creek Parkway, Suite 400 in Leawood, Kansas. And yes, I believe, start with your questions. The LEED certification is not part of this project. The client did not want to pursue that, so. And you'll have to repeat your second question.
Well, this may not be for you, but I'm literally looking at Google Maps and I'm not crazy. The Cancer Center and the Surgery Center are both at 9301.
Yes.
It's right there.
Yes, so they both
So-
occupy, yes, that
So
building
there
to the
will be
south.
half a building that's empty.
Yes, and I'm not sure of what their
I've-
plans
yeah, I
are
don't
with
think
the rest
you
of
would-
that, but yes, the Cancer Center is the only, I guess, group moving into this new building.
Okay. I guess the other questions I would have would actually be for Advent, so.
Okay. I can try to answer on their behalf, but
My concern was with staff parking. So I know that staff currently has to use the garage north of the one that we're talking about. And it can be a problem anyway to find parking for some of those, at least based on my source. When I understand the lower level is usually reserved for doctors and execs for the hospital. So what can be done, is anything for staff parking being taken into consideration? Especially because we're going to be adding staff for a whole new building, so.
right, so, I mean, they've already got a good amount of staff that will be moving from that building there, and they do have a good number of staff that park to the south of the 9301 building that they use now. And there's also been, with the addition of the Gateway building, there was a lot of new parking developed down there on the southwest area of the campus. And then also, along with that new Gateway building up there on the north, the garage you mentioned. Per our parking analysis, it is not used at capacity. A lot of the staff use there in the garage and the parking area that's being taken away. With this change, the surface parking lot there, kind of to the north of the new building, is going to be utilized mainly for patients only parking there for that building, as well as the outpatient building that we're taking the entrance away for, and the Woodland Hills building there just to the west. So that is the owner's strategy there to their parking. That was kind of their long-term plan with the construction of that garage to the north.
Okay, well, I hope they reconsider the LEED certification piece, or at least something similar, so, thank you.
Take that into consideration.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions that we didn't get answered yet?
I mean, I read the Planning Commission's comments too. Parking is always such an issue to go there, whether I'm the patient or I'm taking someone, how close we are to getting somebody who can't really manage by that. I just find it really scary to think that it's really not being looked at as seriously as I look at it.
Yep. Well, I can't move this guy. So I guess with what we've got here, if you look there on the north side, I mean, we've got the Cancer Center entrance that's got a long drop-off lane with room for queuing cars to come in this first drive lane. And then there'll be a second drive lane there. The new outpatient services entrance will be here on the north side with a second canopy and drop-off lane to replace the one they have there currently. So that has been the design there to provide that, I guess, proximity there for patients that are not able to walk.
I don't know what more to say except that it just doesn't seem logical to me.
I'm a little concerned about my 71-year-old mom walking to labor and delivery after working a 12-hour
Exactly.
shift. Yeah.
Exactly.
Ms. Shveta, did you have something?
I just had a question about, so my mom did cancer treatment at St. Luke's and they had valet parking for the cancer center. Do they do that currently at Advent, or is that something that, and that might not be a question you can answer, but just throwing it out
They
there.
do not do that currently, and it has not been in any of the discussions, but that, as well as your guys' parking concerns, we will definitely bring back to the client.
They had some valet at outpatient. Yeah. Not very much, but a little bit.
Mr. Neal, do you have a question?
Well, it's kind of the same question I asked before. Do you have any kind of numbers in terms of the increase in, if you want to call it business, or the patient load that Advent Health is doing this project for. I mean, the reason I ask these things is, since here we have to vote on it, there's an awful lot of building of hospital facilities around the metro area, and at some point, the analysis and that's what, and I know that has nothing to do with this decision, but when you start dealing with these issues of parking and other matters, at some point somebody should be asking questions. We also provide some level of city service, police, fire, other, and again, it's a nonprofit facility, doesn't pay property taxes, doesn't pay some of the costs of the expansion. And I'm just kind of curious about the reasoning behind it, and sort of, has this really been thought through?
Yeah, I can speak there to kind of just the analyses that have kind of been done for this building is we were provided from the hospital with their staff as well as patient projections for the spaces that they are building out, and that is what we use, those numbers what we use for our traffic as well as our parking analysis for this building. So we have taken those into consideration. Anything kind of there beyond as regarding to city services, I mean, we can follow city code, but beyond that, we can't.
Yeah, I understand that. Then we're discussing code issues and approval from that standpoint. I'm just curious as to what the process is, and how the organization looks at these kind of things, and parking, traffic. It seems like we should know what the increase in the traffic or patient load, whatever it is, the metrics is in sort of assessing whether these things are adequate.
Oh, we have more questions this way. Shadridge. Okay.
Follow-up question. So speaking of transportation, are there plans to include multimodal options for the parking and drive-up structures? So bicycle parking, bike lanes, anything like that?
Not any bike lanes, but we can provide some bicycle bike racks there if necessary. It's typically something we usually try to incorporate on most projects, but as far as motorcycle parking, I don't believe so.
I'm worried about cyclists, I think, yeah, more than anything. So we're really trying to focus on making Merriam a bike-friendly community, and it would be great if the Advent Health could help us support that. How much green space is going to be part of the new project? Like, what's the percentage? Do you know?
I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I can say it is an increase in what is there now, the land that we're disturbing. Yes.
Other questions, Mr. Leahy?
At the risk of over discussing parking, they meet what the city requires. If we want to have a real conversation about changing the code to increase parking requirements for medical facilities, we can do that later. But I'm concerned you're going to take 546 parking spaces offline during construction, and then you're going to be under the requirements, and parking is just going to be that much worse. Have you guys talked about how you're going to phase it, about maybe opening the parking lot, turning the parking lot over first so that parking then becomes available during construction of the building?
Well, so I guess the parking that we're taking away there is, since we won't have the entrances available, especially for that outpatient entrance, it's not, having that parking available doesn't help a whole lot there in the phasing, since patients will be directed to the main entrance for access to the outpatient center during construction.
Yeah, but it's not just patients. I mean, when I've done projects at Advent, parking for everybody is a challenge. It's not.
Right. And I guess that's too where pushing the staff then to that parking garage there to the north that was constructed for them there was a plan now. I know there's a lot of staff that park in that lot there to the west of the outpatient area, in the west of that garage right now, so. But we will-
So will it be phased, or is it all just gonna be fenced off around all of the construction the whole time?
It'll all be fenced off there at one time, so.
Sorry.
And I will say that client we have a 15-month construction window, trying to stay within just to minimize that downtime. So that is one of the parameters of the client, so.
That was my next question, was what's the project timeline to completion, or from tearing down their garage to completion?
Yeah, so they're looking at the tearing down the garage there at the end of August there. I believe the week of August 29th was when demolition there starts. There is a little bit of prep work ahead of time just to get some utilities out of the way, but that won't shut down the main entrance there until the end of August, so, and then the 15 months.
And then, sorry, personally, I go to PT at that pain center, and that's going to take away all the parking right there, if you're, fencing off all of that. So again, more parking questions, sorry, but I'm just curious about that.
The pain center, is that there in the building, separate building to the west you're talking about? Okay. Most of that parking will remain, the extensive construction will kind of go up into that existing lot and kind of connect and bring a new drive kind of through there. So we'll not take away the majority of the parking there at that building.
But I'm going to want to use it when I go up there, so just.
Sorry, that parking lot just got redone, so now it's like they're just tearing it up after they redid it. So, sorry, it's just wasteful.
Okay, Mr. Silvers, go ahead.
Believe it or not, this has nothing to do with parking. So the city of Merriam just recently redid East Frontage Road, and I was just curious what path the construction and demolition vehicles will be taking while doing this project.
Try to navigate up there. So they will be coming here from the drive out the site to the north in that drive, then towards, yes, East Frontage Road. It is. I mean, fortunately, that's the only way in and out of the site, either from 75th or 74th Street or the drive there to the north.
Do you have any idea the tonnage of material that will be taken in and out of that?
I do not. But it will not be a small amount. We're taking down a large garage, so.
Any other questions? Okay. Director Dyer, I know there was a member from the audience that's tried to get my attention. I don't know if it's appropriate for them to be able to ask questions.
Your public hearing was held by your planning commission, so any information that's presented to you by the public was not heard by your planning commission. So if there's a desire to hear that, and if it sways anybody's opinion, I would suggest that you remand it back to the planning commission. So again, public hearing was handled at the planning commission. It was not, and there was no public comments then.
I would think at this time then probably we shouldn't have any questions. I would ask that individual to meet afterwards if you have questions and concerns. But, okay, are there any other questions for the applicant? Okay, if not, I will entertain a motion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Hans, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council concur with the recommendation of the Planning Commission and approve with conditions a preliminary development plan for the Advent Health Cancer Center and authorize the mayor to sign the effectuating ordinance.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I hear a second? Okay, Ms. Eldridge.
Mr. Mayor, second.
Okay, we have a motion second, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Neal.
To move the process forward, I'm going to go ahead and vote aye. I still have some questions, and I really hope that just some of these kind of questions questions get answered in the future if we keep getting projects from Advent Health.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
In the same vein as Councilmember Neal, to keep the process moving forward, I'll vote aye. However, I have concerns about Advent as a whole and their desire to keep building when faced with significant staffing shortages, and the way that that's affecting employees. As a member of our community, I also hope that they reconsider or consider creating a building that gives back to the community in a sustainable way, not just for longevity, but also for improving the environment around it. So not just healing patients within it, but also helping heal the area around it as well. I'm also very concerned about the parking situation, as we all are.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, it looks like our next item up is consider approval of a budget adjustment from the Transit Guest Contingency Fund. Director Slocum, thank you.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. Before I start this evening, I do want to take a moment and thank all of you for your support on Saturday. My staff truly appreciates that, and to feel that support back, whether you were there in attendance or you helped volunteer for the day.
What was Saturday?
Nothing, nothing at all. We just all showed up at the park.
It was awesome.
So I just wanted to take this time to say thank you, because staff did notice, and it is very much appreciated to have that support, so.
And we would ask you to thank staff for the great job that they did as well.
Well, I will share that.
Excellent. So many compliments from people.
Well, we had a little help on the weather. So this evening, I'm before you with an item to ask for some money from the contingency fund, from the transient guest fund. There are 4 items that have come to our attention that were non-budgeted repairs. Unfortunately, just things that kind of weren't on our radar at all. As you might be aware, the banners at the marketplace are much higher than the street banners. And when we bought new banners last year, and this year when they went to put them up, the hardware just disintegrated and was not safe. So we made the effort, bought new hardware, but it had to be a little bit higher rated, which meant it was a little bit more expensive. And then in addition to that, our wonderful marketplace sign that advertises all of our events. The south side always seems to take some damage because of the sun. We always have 1 or 2 that go out throughout the year. This year we had 3 go out. Unfortunately, we also found out that the parent company of that sign is no longer going to support that sign as of March of this year. So as we were looking to try and replace the sign, they put us on a list that said if they had extra diodes, we could purchase those. We took advantage of that, knowing that in 2023 we are planning on replacing that sign as part of the Merriam Drive project, but we don't know what that timing will be, and it will likely be that we need to replace those diodes. We want that to be readable to our, I hope that's a word, to our public as they drive by. So we have a few parts on order, actually on hold for us by the company that repairs that for us. A little bit more expensive than our budget allows for. And lastly, but not least, our site water outside of the marketplace. The bathrooms are working, but we do have no site water for our vendors at the marketplace. We are currently connecting a hose to the men's restroom and running that outside so people can access water. There is a damaged pipe within one of the mortared columns, so we have to remove the stone, replace the plumbing, and repair their plumbing, and then put the stone back on. So that is the one piece of the puzzle that really hasn't been done. But taking that all into consideration, this would more than deplete our normal operating budget, and there's still some normal operating expenses that have to occur out of that line. So after talking to Donna, we decided that we should just lump this all together and come to you and ask for a contingency request so that we can continue to maintain the market as you all would expect us to maintain it. So I'm asking for money. It's the first time in a while, though. So, anyway, any questions?
We have questions for Director Slocum. Mr. Neal, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand so basically, this is an additional 10,300, which obviously is not a huge amount of money, but over the operating, these are things that would normally be paid for out of the operating
Yeah,
budget?
that operating budget's only $6,000.
Right, so my question now is, in the budget that's being considered, has that line item been adjusted, or is this a one-time thing, or, I guess I'm just trying to understand.
So we have added to the operating budget hardware replacement, because that is something that hasn't really come up in my 10 years. I believe Public Works kind of has been managing that through their budgets, and so we're trying to be more respectful of their budget. So we have asked for some budget hardware. Mortar repair, we always somewhat budget for a little bit, but this is sizable because of the amount of mortar. Normally, we're just doing mortar repair where there's cracks. This is a significant replacement, so it's even larger than the scope. I don't think outside of this repair that it'll be needed again for a long time. And then, of course, the diodes is kind of once the sign is replaced, we always budget that, but the age of it is now catching up with us. So I think we've going to have a good plan moving forward. It's just this year kind of it all fell together at a bad time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Director Slocum? Okay, I see no other questions.
All right.
I would entertain a motion.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Shatrich.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council approve a budget adjustment of $10,300 from the Transient Guest Fund contingency to Transient Guest Fund / Merriam Marketplace Building Grounds Maintenance.
Okay, we have a motion, and, okay, Ms. Ryder, go ahead.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Looks like our next item is an agreement with BSNF, or BNSF, excuse me. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Got it. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'm requesting the approval of 3 agreements with BNSF related to the improvements for the West Frontage Road project. To increase walkability and connectivity along West Frontage Road, we're replacing and installing new sidewalks. To accomplish this, we need to install a sidewalk that crosses the actual railroad tracks. The city needs to acquire necessary easements along the railroad right-of-way to do that. We also asked them to replace the panels along the roadway surface while they're doing that project. And we're going to split the cost of those panels with BNSF because we're asking them to replace those ahead of their normal schedule. The city is responsible for all the costs for the sidewalk improvements along that stretch. The total cost associated with these improvements is $54,130. We currently have $24,271.35 of the budgeted $2,163,863 to complete the project. We'd like to use available TIF funds for the remaining $29,858.47. I'm here to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Director McDonald? Okay, I see no questions. Well, I would entertain a motion then. Okay, Ms. Hands.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council approve agreements with BNSF for the improvements related to the sidewalk construction and new crossing surface along West Frontage Road.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second? Okay, it looks like Mr. Silvers.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, it looks like our next item on the agenda is consider approval of an ordinance condemning lands. Mr. Engel, looks like going to handle that one.
I am. Thank you, Mayor, Council. The item before you right now is consider approval of an ordinance condemning lands or interest in lands for the reconstruction of 55th Street between Merriam Drive and Schweitzer. The 55th Street project from Merriam Drive to Schweitzer Road's been in the CIP for the last 5 years. The scope of work includes full street replacement of a curb and gutter, 2-inch mill and overlay, the addition of bike lanes and sidewalks. Project cost is $2.6 million, approximately 50% of which is coming from cars. The utility companies are on site currently and have been relocating their utilities that are in the right-of-way. As with most street projects, the city needs to acquire temporary construction easements. Temporary construction easements essentially are just rental rights to use a portion of people's property for the construction of the project. Temporary construction easements are only in effect during the duration of the project, and at the end of the project, all that property is restored. Per City Council Policy 6.1, all residents that grant an easement are paid fair market value, are justly compensated on fair market value for just the portion of the property that's being disrupted. The cities retain the services of Oric and Erskine LLC to serve as our city right-of-way counsel. Their process has included multiple letters to residents as well as site visits, knocking on doors, trying to reach out to those individuals that we've had trouble getting a hold of. To date, we have 25 of 35 easements. I believe we have one that's been approved. We just don't have the signatures yet. Is that still correct? Yep. So in order to keep the project on schedule, continue to keep it moving forward, we are recommending that we move on to the next stage of the condemnation process, which is the approval of the ordinance. Per Kansas statute, the process has several steps, and there are multiple opportunities for this not to go to condemnation. Condemnation is a process. There's a destination at the end, but ultimately it's a process. At each one of these steps, if we're able to come to an agreement and resolve the issue that we're having with a particular property owner, we can stop the process with them. So per statutes, the first step is a resolution declaring the project necessary. Council on May 9th approved that resolution, and they directed a survey be completed of the properties that we were still having problems coming to agreement with. That survey has been completed. You'll see the results of that survey are in your packet for each of the 10 properties. Based on the recommendation of our right-of-way council, they are asking that we adopt the attached ordinance, next step being the filing of a petition in district court. Again, if we will continue to negotiate and fair and equitable as we can with all of these folks to try to resolve the issues that we're having with them, but the project does need to go on. So again, we are recommending the approval of this ordinance. The ordinance has been drafted by our right-of-way council. It's been approved by our city attorney. Normally for ordinances, we would have a first reading. We are recommending waiving the first reading because we had a resolution at the last meeting. The customary first reading generally is to put an item in the public, has some time to marinate, if you will, within the public for people to understand that it's something we're discussing. Since that's already been on the council agenda, it's been in the Shawnee Mission Post, notice has been given, plus the folks that we are working with are well aware that this project is coming, this project needs to move on, and if we can't find some resolution, this is an inevitable, potentially inevitable end to getting the project done. That being said, staff recommends we waive the first reading and approve the ordinance. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Neal, go ahead.
Okay. I'm not an expert on this, but my reading of the ordinance suggests that condemnation of these specific properties will essentially occur when we pass this evening. Is that correct?
That is not correct.
Okay.
please do if I'm wrong. We still would have to file in court. Then there's actually a process that follows itself in court. So again, there's an ultimate destination, which would be condemnation, but we would have to file it in court. It would go to district court. Then there's a process where they would approve three non-partial parties.
Disinterested appraisers who are residents of Johnson County. And then there's an administrative process whereby there is a hearing where the property owner can appear, argue for their valuation, and they issue a report which identifies what they deem to be fair market value for the property interest being taken. Then the city has 30 days from the date of issuance of that report to pay those monies into court. And as soon as the city pays those monies into court, it is at that point in time that the property interest is conveyed. So at any time before that payment into court, Chris mentioned there's off-ramps, negotiation opportunities. There's going to be plenty of time between now and then for that to happen.
Right, and I appreciate that clarification because that's essentially, I wanted to understand, because just in the ordinance, it doesn't discuss any compensation, so I appreciate that. That was where I was headed.
Okay. Mr. Silvers, go ahead.
I actually think you might have answered my question, but as far as I know, there are 3 property owners that have not been able to be reached. Is that correct?
We've got new address for some people, so currently there is 1 person.
Okay, so my question is, if we can't reach that person and we go into the process of condemnation and we pay into the court the fees, can this project continue if that party never comes forward, never communicates with the city, is because we paid the court?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be their claim
And
if they did show up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So in addition to, once we go to condemnation for those property owners who are non-responsive, there are also publication requirements for situations just like that so that the property owners can go to the newspaper record, find that. And yes, those monies are paid into court and they would in essence sit there until that property owner comes forward and claims them.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Engel?
Real quick, just to be clear, these are all temporary construction easements. Everybody will get their property back the way it was
Even better. We would
before we
argue.
touched it.
We would argue even better. That's generally our rule of thumb, is to give it back better than we got it.
That's what I thought, just making sure.
Okay. Do we have any additional questions? Okay, I think the first step at this point would be consider a motion for waiving of that first. Okay.
She had her hand up first.
Ms. Shadrich, okay.
Great.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I move the council waive the customary first reading of an ordinance condemning lands or interests in lands for the reconstruction of 55th Street.
Okay, we have a motion. We have Ms. Sands.
And I'd like to second it.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I think we have a second motion that I would entertain. Ms. Sands.
Yes, I move that the council approve an ordinance condemning lands or interests in lands for the reconstruction of the 55th Street project.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second by, looks, Ms. Shadrich.
Mr. Mayor, I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay. Looks like our next item is consider approval of amendments to the employee handbook. All right. Coming forward, thank you.
Good evening, council and mayor. Thanks for having me tonight. I will ask for just a little bit of grace, as this is my first time presenting to council ever. So I hope to, if not impress, then at least to woo some of you to vote in our favor.
I'm sure you're well prepared now that you're a graduate of
Yes.
Leadership Northeast.
What do you know about parking spaces?
Not a lot. Not a lot. So as you read in your packet, staff is recommending changes to the employee handbook, specifically the employee referral program. So there are 3 proposed changes, which include an increased award. Currently, the award for referral or successful referral is $300. We're asking for reduced time for payout. Currently, it is 12 months for full $300 payout. We're asking for a reduced time frame of 6 months. And then thirdly, we're asking to establish 2 tiers of payment. One for positions that are filled within 8 weeks time frame for a total of $750 payout, and one for vacancies that are filled that take longer than 8 weeks. And we're asking that that be increased to a total of $1,500. So I first want to touch on the success of our current program, because I do think it speaks volumes about Team Merriam and the employees that are all of us sitting out here. In the last 12 months, we've had 6 full-time hires that have been referred by current employees, including one who was referred by a former employee, which I think is pretty amazing. All 6 of these employees are still active members of Team Merriam, and some people are still awaiting payout, their full payout for those referrals. I think these are incredible statistics. I've been in HR a long time, I've recruited a long time, and that's a really good success rate. It makes me proud that people want to work here. We strive really hard. The Z team strives to make this a great place to work. And when it shows in statistics, it makes me happy. It also means that we take council's goal of recruiting and retaining Northeast Johnson County's top talent to heart. We take it seriously. So if it's successful, then why am I asking for change? So we are looking currently at confirmed 4 vacancies in our police department by the 30th of June, which is just over a month from today. Our Public Works Department, which we've been bragging recently was fully staffed for the first time since May of 2020, just retired a long-tenured employee, and these positions are increasingly difficult to recruit for. Police Department is averaging 4 applications per month, and our Public Works Department is averaging 1 per month. These vacancies are exhausting on current staff because they're pulling the ropes for missing team members. I mentioned the application averages. As we know, not all people who apply for jobs are qualified to work in the positions for which they're applying. It's our job as a city to provide excellent service to our citizens, and we can't do that if we don't have employees, if we can't staff ourselves. We need candidates to fill the vacancies, and the applicant pool is fairly dry right now, echoing what Karen Crane said, echoing Whitney Yadrich's sentiments on the current staffing crisis in the United States, I would say. So we believe if the referral pot is sweetened, we can have 87 full-time employees kind of carrying the lantern out and recruiting for us, and helping to shorten that time to hire statistic. I appreciate you all hearing what I had to say tonight, and am open to questions if you have them.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Thompson? Yep, Mr. Neal, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually have a couple questions. Did I hear you say numbers 750 and 1,500? And I've been looking at the documents in the packet and the red line and also the other document, and it looks like different numbers than what you just, I don't know whether I'm not reading it right.
I believe I think it says $500 initially, so when the employee start date, the referring employee would receive $500, the pay period following the employee's start, and then
Right.
the remainder of the amount after 6 months of successful
Okay.
employment.
Okay, I guess my concern is, and I absolutely get everything you're talking about in terms of the difficulty in hiring folks right now. But the problem I have is essentially awarding a $500 after someone shows up for a single day. I'd like to think that everybody would operate within the spirit of of such a policy and not offer somebody to show up with no intention of actually staying for $500.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so I think this could be improved if there was a waiting time, like maybe even 2 weeks or something.
And it was part of the consideration, and currently, so as it stands, the referring employee has to wait until the candidate has surpassed 30 days for that first payout. I can tell you from experience, a lot of that is weeded out in the interview process. We ask questions that we feel could potentially get to the root of this person may just be a money grubber. Or I would greatly and truly hope that a referring employee who's a present employee of the city wouldn't look to, in effect, rip us off. I would expect better of our employees than that.
I guess my concern is, what's the harm in having a little longer period, even, like I said, a pay period or a week of employment or something other than just they show up and
Right.
the money flows.
So these programs instill trust in current employees, but it's definitely something we can talk about if that's needed. Again, I've done this for a long time, and I've never had an employee. Take advantage of an employee referral program. It just hasn't happened in my experience. That doesn't mean it couldn't.
Thank you. Ms. Haynes, go ahead.
So, when you were on a panel.
I was.
Yes, and didn't we hear that others in the metro area are using the kind of incentive program? And did you consider other municipalities' ideas as well?
So instead I used the old-fashioned Google. And so just looking at what averages are, average referral bonuses are anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000. And we ultimately felt like $1,500 was a good reward. It's not at the top of the payout, but it surely is more incentivizing than the present $300 that we're offering. It's certainly a question that I could go and ask. Yeah.
Ms. Shadridge.
Is there a cap on how many referrals an employee can make?
We don't have it capped.
Other questions for Ms. Thompson? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I applaud your being proactive in dealing with. A little bit concerned that we are reacting to a current employment situation and embedding that into our handbook. So in a couple of years, when the economy changes, we don't need referrals.
Sure.
Will we be coming back and reducing it in the handbook?
Definitely could do that as the economy changes.
I mean, I say we're embedding it in the handbook, but we change it now, we can change it then.
Yep, yep. And
Maybe
ultimately,
that's not a big issue.
we make recommendations and you all approve the employee handbook.
Ms. Shadrich, you
I
have
will
a
say,
question?
just to comment on that, though, too, Bruce, I see where you're coming from. But I was getting this same referral bonus like 10, 12 years ago for a company that I worked at. And it wasn't like you didn't require PhDs or doctorates or anything to work there. It was, an ad agency. So I think this is more than, this is probably due, would be my opinion, for something like that.
If I could just add this, Stephanie's done a great job, and these are great questions. When you take into consideration, say, a police officer, before a police officer hits the street and is on their own, we've spent upwards to $45,000. And we, as Stephanie did a great job explaining, our best apostles are our existing employees. I mean, those are the ones that they understand what Team Merriam is. They understand the value of working here, and we truly believe, I believe, I'll speak for myself, in my heart of hearts, that give us 6 months with somebody, and we've got them. I mean, it doesn't take that long. So I personally was comfortable with this. I thought it was a great recommendation. We did have some give and take with the department heads. But when you think about, again, the amount of money that it takes just to get somebody here in Public Works and get them their CDL, and then we do, unfortunately, sometimes have people that can't pass their CDL. We have to let them go, but we've paid them for sometimes 2-3 months. I mean, sometimes even we give them even more than 2 or 3 months and let them take it multiple times because they're great employees and we want to work with our employees. We felt like this was a fair amount of money to motivate good employees to get good coworkers. But we did discuss all of those major concerns and what made a lot of sense. So again, not to take anything away from Stephanie, she's done a great job.
I just have a comment. This is almost identical to my office guidelines, so I think it's totally on par with everything that's going on in other industries, not just local government. So I think it's a wonderful thing to bring to us. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing no other questions, I would entertain a motion. Okay, Ms. Shadrich.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council approve a resolution amending Section 3.07 of the Employee Handbook.
We have a motion, or a second? Ms. Ryder.
I second that.
Okay. We have a motion, a second. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Unfortunately, because I just can't, I don't agree with not having at least a small period of before the referring employee receives the bonus. I just don't think that's a good way of doing this. I'm going to have to vote no.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-1.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay. And thank you for you did a great job for your first time, Stephanie. Thank you. Okay, Community Development Update, Director Dyer.
Just a couple things to talk about on the community development update. One, first of all, the driveways for the driveway grant program have been installed and in place, and the contractor has submitted documents for that, so we're in the process of getting him paid for that. The other thing, Chipotle, we have issued a permit for that construction of that facility, so that also includes the demolition of it. And then the last thing I had is Fred Sherman, the Johnson County election commissioner, sent over to us an initial draft of the map that they're having to put together in regards to the redistricting that has been drawn up by the state legislature and now has passed the Supreme Court. Probably the one effect it has for Merriam, or the one most significant effect it has for Merriam, is it shifts one of the Kansas House lines over from Schweitzer, a little bit further to the east, over to Knox. And what that does is not to get too much into it, but each one of the wards is divided into, I believe, 2 precincts. And what that's going to do is for wards 1 and 2, we'll divide those precincts up even more. So we'll end up having 4 precincts in those wards. We took a look at to see whether maybe by dividing up those precincts, we could rebalance the city a little bit in wards and stuff like that. Just to let you know, we can only balance our wards by using the precincts. We can't draw our own lines. So we did a quick analysis of that, and there's no benefit to moving any of the precincts around based upon that. So just again, in summary, moving the precincts around to balance the wards.
Wards, right.
Sorry. So there was no benefit to moving the precincts around to balance the wards. So I guess in summary, just like to say, we've taken a look at it. Don't think we're not moving or planning on changing the boundaries, any ward boundaries. However, there will be a couple of new precincts that will occur. So with that, happy to answer any questions about any community development activities.
Any questions for Director Darrow? I see no questions. All right. Good job. Thank you. Okay. Well, looks like Director Oliver is going to come up and tell us about our great financial report.
Now that the audit's over with, finance will begin working on the. Thank you. Okay. Now that the audit's over with, the finance department will begin working on the PAFR, which is the popular annual financial report, which is about a 10-page document that really summarizes the audit and easier to understand for the typical layman terms. And so we will be distributing that in June. And of course, we've got the budget underway, and so we'll be back at the second meeting in June to talk to you further about the budget. The city's finances continue to be going well. Sales tax, last year I was telling you we were having 10, 15% increases. We're not having large increases like that. We're just kind of staying at that level that is an elevated level, and everything's just going along. I would caution you again, at some point, I don't know if the bubble is going to burst and some of that's going to come back or not. But right now, all is going well, and expenditures are right where we would expect them, and everybody's tracking to be under budget. I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have for me.
Do we have any questions?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Oliver. Okay, that's like, and then the only thing I have is an informational, we'll get the minutes from, any questions for Director Dyer about the minutes? Or not? Mr. Engel, do we have anything else?
Just 2 items. One, I would assume if you came in through the front door, you'll see that we have started our City Hall exterior improvements. That is a project that was budgeted for 2020 that we pushed to 2021 and pushed to 2022, and finally have been able to start that. We've been able to maintain the ADA and the main entrances in there, and we're hoping to have that wrapped up in the weeks to come. Pretty excited to have that. And then again, as a follow-up to the proclamation for Mark's 50th anniversary, I just want to put in a plug for their regional assembly. That will be on Friday, June 10th at the Sheridan. It's from 11:30 to 1. Please, if you are interested, let me know. We'll be happy to register you so we can send a contingent of Merriam folks down to the Mark Regional Assembly. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Engel?
Do we usually have people go to the assembly?
We usually have a couple. It's been a while because we haven't had it. So, but traditionally we would have a handful of people. I think we've even some years had to sponsor half a table where we've had so many people. But yeah, it's a good event.
I won't be able to attend this year, but it is a good event to attend, just saying, if you have time.
Okay.
And you can stay down at the Sheridan and tailgate that evening as the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. So
I don't recall seeing that on any of the publications.
Before or after?
yeah, you got to be plugged in.
Okay. I hear no other questions for Mr. Engel. I would entertain a motion. I think Okay.
Mr.
Ms.
Mayor,
Hance.
I move we adjourn.
And we have a second by Ms. Yadridge?
Mr. Mayor, I second that.
Okay. Call for the vote.
All
Madam
in
Clerk.
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.